Remember last month when Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia and Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, they wrote a letter to the Consumer Product Safety Commission saying that extra regulation of gas stoves and gas ovens in America was needed because a study showed that it was harming children. You gotta do it for the children. And of course we all said, oh, they're trying to ban gas stoves now. And the left all said, oh, you're crazy. Of course they're not trying to ban gas stoves. How dare you lie about that? You right-wing MAGA fascists, nobody's trying to ban gas stoves. This weekend, the Department of Energy is proposing new regulations for gas stoves that would basically ban half of the gas stoves that are currently on the market. You crazy right-wing conspiracy theorist. Marc Morano, founder of Climate Depot and author of The Great Reset, joins us now. Well, it's sort of a theme of the day today, Mark. Yesterday's conspiracy theory is today's truth.
Absolutely. I mean, we were just told we were all conspiracy nuts if we thought that the COVID had something to do with a lab in Wuhan.
Right.
Remember that?
Exactly.
Coordinate government effort with top level Fauci and the authors and the funders of this were working in collusion with the media. Suppress it. What a conspiracy! It turns out it's true.
But the insidious thing about this gas stove thing is all of this is based on a report that is completely bogus.
This is based on a report with a group out of Denver, Colorado, that literally is a climate activist group seeking to eliminate emissions in buildings. One of the funders and the board of this is Todd Stern, the architect of the UN Paris Agreement. And the study, of course, ignores the fact that gas stove use in the states with the highest have some of the lowest asthma rates. There's no correlation looking at gas stove use, asthma, and also ignore, this is the most hilarious, Larry, the study didn't address cooking oils, which by some estimates are 10 times more noxious with emissions that could cause asthma than potentially the natural gas emissions from the stove. So, it's like, why would you cook inside at all? We've been cooking, of course, inside since we were cavemen, but now we have to ban it. And of course, it wasn't just asthma. It was also the climate impact of this. And this was originally mentioned by the head of the Consumer Product Safety Administration, which is a man named Trumpka, who's the son of a former major Democratic labor leader. I wonder how he got his job. And he announced this on Twitter that they were going to ban it. We, of course, reacted because the head of a federal regulatory agency is using the word ban. And then they said we were conspiracy nuts. Yeah. Well, now, as you mentioned, it turns out it's all true. And but I think the only caveat is they're only about half of the stoves. They're only going to ban half of them.
Yeah,
so
it's
I think
only half.
Conspiracy nuts to think they were going to go higher than 50%.
Well, but here's what's important, Mark. The half that they're banning are the most affordable half. See, yeah. you can get a really, really expensive one that has a big vent and a hood that vents to the outdoors and all of that jazz. But if you're not a gajillionaire and you can't afford an oven like that or a stove like that, you're kind of out of luck. And Mark, there's another aspect of this that you're sort of dancing around. Let's dive right into it. It's the Consumer Protection Safety Commission that first discussed it, and now the Department of Energy. Neither of those bodies are legislative bodies. Yes. Nobody's voting on this. No elected official has their name on it. This is the insidious truth about what goes on in D.C. All these bans and all of this stuff, it's from the regulatory state. It's from people. You don't even know their names. We never vote for them.
We wake up every day with some new nameless federal bureaucrat announcing some new ban. Now, same thing happened that we're seeing in gas stoves without legislation, happening with cars. And by the way, you just mentioned affecting the people of lower income. What does a gas car ban do except affect the most poor and those with the most fixed income of everyone? I mean, if you ban Teslas, first of all, the only people who can afford Teslas are very high income, high wealthy, given that high average cost of that. So you have unelected bureaucrats banning these things. But how are they doing it? Through collusion. World Bank announcing the automakers are not going to fund gas-powered cars. You have the big corporate banks announcing they're not going to do car loans for people who want to get that. So the same thing happens with meat eating. Same thing happened in the whole COVID lockdowns. None of this involved any democracy. In many cases, it's corporate government collusion. And what I want to know is, in terms of these gas stoves, is are we going to draw the line somewhere? If we're mandated to eat insects, I sure as hell want to saute those on my gas stove and not be forced to use an electric. We have to draw the line somewhere. If I'm eating crickets, it better be cooked on a gas stove.
I hadn't even thought of that part. And of course, Mark, one of the reasons why we love your book, The Great Reset, and also all the great content that you put at Climate Depot, is that you actually sort of play this out. All right, fine, let's say you banned half the gas stoves. Well, it doesn't actually make that big a. They claim they're all about carbon emissions and they want to, bring down the temperature of the planet. Is there any science to support the idea that this would have even any kind of impact other than drive the rest of us crazy?
No, it's a psychological op. It's a way to say this is like mask wearing, except it's more significant because people aren't going to be able to afford this to be mandated to buy electric. But it's a visual representation that we're all in this together, fighting climate change, despite the fact that John Kerry has admitted publicly on 3 separate occasions that even if we in the United States went to 0 emissions, it wouldn't even really affect global CO2 levels, let alone wacky claims of, legislating the weather or extreme storms. So China, India, the developing world are not doing any of this. They're laughing at us while we sit here in our hair shirts and try to, show us how we're so virtuous by doing by allowing this to be done. We have to fight this at every level. We have to resist this. This is out of completely bonkers what's headed now. They're going after the high yield agriculture. Remember, they're collapsing food, transportation, energy, our free speech, and even our currency, coming up with central bank digital currency. And we're not voting. Remember, everything I just said, there's no bill before Congress. We're going to vote, to keep mediating. No, this is all happening, corporate government collusion, federal bureaucracy, unelected. And that's, of course, what the gas stove is, unelected federal bureaucrats just going to town, telling us what we can and can't do.
What fools we were when we were celebrating. Look at AOC. She won't even put her Green New Deal up for a committee hearing or for a vote because she didn't have to. Mark, she doesn't have to. She can get her Green New Deal without any vote being cast in Congress.
It's absolutely true. And then when you have things like the Inflation Reduction Act, which is billed as a non-climate bill before they vote, and afterward we're all told, well, that was actually the greatest climate bill. And what's so shocking about this Inflation Reduction Act is it's built in decades in advance to fund mandates in green energy and all these projects to benefit Democratic donors. So we're in for this in the long haul. Number 1 priority, but top 5 priority of any future president has to be to repeal, and any future Congress has to be repeal this Inflation Reduction Act, which didn't bring the mandates but brought the funding to lead to all sorts of mandates and more of this corporate government collusion.
And by the way, I just want to, just to sort of tie up a lot of the stories that we cover on this program, one of the reasons that we focus on education so much and school boards and curriculum is if you look at the curriculum changes of 25 years ago, it was all focused on science books and history books and other books, all talking about the climate. We have a whole generation of kids who grew up thinking that the planet was going to burn and the oceans were going to boil because they started embedding all of this in elementary school curriculums decades ago.
They really had. Now, I testified at the West Virginia Public School Board and the Capitol a few years back about the Common Core curriculum. And they were Common Core, which is the national standards for all public schools, were changing the curriculum to basically say there's no dissent on climate. What NASA and the United Nations claim is the only acceptable view. And that's what kids are being spoon-fed. Yeah. They're not being taught the scientific method where it doesn't matter if you claim you have 97% of scientists. All it takes is one scientist with data to overturn an entire consensus. Einstein talked at length and wrote at length about this idea of a consensus being meaningless. But that's what kids are taught, that there's no debate, no dissent. We're all doomed from kindergarten through college. And then that's why you even get some Republicans out there who are like, well, we have to say climate's a problem and we have to offer a solution. We'll plant trees or, carbon capture because young people believe it. Well, in the 1960s, we had a lot of hippies who believed a lot of wacky things, and they later grew up to be conservative and more rational and made sense. So we don't condemn young people by pandering to their latest delusion. We let them grow up, and they'll come to us eventually when they realize how they've been duped by this climate agenda and a lot of other agendas, I might add.
And meanwhile, Marc Morano, just 30 seconds left with this war on gas stoves now. It happens to be going after an energy source that we have an abundance of here in America, that we won't be reliant on any other country. It's actually one of the most affordable and cheapest. It's been one of the biggest driving forces of our economy until Joe Biden became president and stopped exploration of natural gas.
Yeah, the key with natural gas is we have led the world in reducing our emissions. If you actually cared about climate, CO2, the UN Paris, we would be praising America. Under Trump, we led the world reducing CO2. Why? Because of our technological innovation with natural gas fracking, taking over for coal. Our emissions are dropping like a stone, while the rest of the world is ramping up.
Marc Morano, Climate Depot. More to come on O'Connor tonight.